Okay, we are ready to go. So I am going to call the Town Board special meeting for March 26, 2020 at 4:02 p.m. to order. Ms. Iker, will you please take roll call?
Stand by. You're good, Crystal.
Mayor Christy Melendez,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett,
Here.
Miles Baker,
Here.
Barry Wilson,
Stand by. He is on the other line. He is here.
I am here.
thank you, Paul Rennemeyer,
Here.
Tom Jones,
Here.
David Soslowski,
Here.
Okay, thank you. So we have everybody present. We have one item this evening, and that is, or this afternoon, official board action item B, and that is to look at ordinance number 2020-1606, an ordinance authorizing the town manager to approve certain classes of dining and drinking establishments to temporarily receive refunds and temporarily defer the payment of town sales tax in response to the COVID-19 virus public health emergency. And who's going to, Mr. Hale, you or Mr. McCarger?
I think Mr. McCarger is going to walk the board through the higher points of the ordinance.
Okay.
And then I'm here for questions.
Okay, Mr. McCarger, are you ready to walk us through?
I am, Madam Mayor. Can everyone hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Jones can.
Just making sure. Okay. So let me walk you through this. A version of this was circulated to you yesterday, and with a few comments, we made some small revisions that were then circulated again with the resolution number appearing at the top. So the version that I am working off is the second version that was circulated yesterday. Of course, we have to have a series of recitals that give the legislative intent and the context behind this. So what we have is a catch-all reference to the governor's orders closing restaurants and bars. There was a later comment today from Mr. Soslowski suggesting that perhaps we add a reference to the stay-at-home order. I'm happy to do that. The stay-at-home order, which I read this afternoon, doesn't materially change the impact on bars and restaurants when it comes to large gatherings and the closure of those establishments. But if that is the will of the board, I can add a recital to that before we conclude today, assuming there's consensus on that. I think it's pretty clear through the remainder of the recitals that the impact on businesses, although we're not entirely clear what that will be substantial on certain classes of businesses, and that the town manager, if given authority under this ordinance, would have the ability to make allowances for some of these businesses. And in fact, that is not unusual in the context of sales tax in the sales tax office. In other words, if somebody has trouble paying their taxes, the sales tax division does work with taxpayers to try to work out payment plans and all of that. And that will not change under this ordinance, even for those who don't qualify, even for those who are deemed to not qualify. So those are the recitals that lay out what the problem is and what the powers are that we have. And then we get into the guts of the ordinance. Madam Mayor, do you want to check with everyone to see if there are any questions or further comments on the recitals?
Okay. Are there any comments or further questions from any town board members? Signify.
Please, you can unmute yourselves, please.
Unmute yourself one at a time and let us know that you have a comment or a question.
I don't know how to unmute myself.
Well, you are.
You're unmuted.
You're
You're
unmuted.
unmuted.
Oh,
You're unmuted, David.
you didn't hear that can of beer crack open then, I guess.
But I can clearly hear you.
Good. Okay. Ian, my comment on regarding the most recent governor's issuance, I don't view it as material. I agree with you. I think the existing whereas clauses capture the import of the concern. Just the fact that it came out, I thought might add some strength to why this is in fact such an emergency. But I'm kind of different.
Okay, understood. Anyone else?
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. McCarter. Jess Humphreys, Administrative Services Director. In order to kind of keep the flow going and help people understand who's speaking, please make sure to say your name and your title. That would be great before you speak.
Thank you, Jess. All right, back. This is again Ian McCarter. Let's get back into the guts of Section 1. What we attempted to do here was identify a straightforward, clear distinction for eligibility. This criteria was largely built by Shane and Stacy Miller, so I don't have a lot of comments on it. I think it is clear that what we're talking about are full-service restaurants, the kinds of restaurants where someone comes to your table and serves you, but it also includes licensed drinking establishments and coffee houses. But then we draw the bright line, which is without drive-through service, and so that eliminates a number of establishments that might have service inside, but as long as they have a drive-through window, I believe Stacy and Shane indicated that allows them to continue to do business at some level, perhaps at a higher level than they were before through their drive-through window. We did not speak much about takeout service because that's what gets us into trying to measure how much of their business is takeout versus not, and we just felt that was too cumbersome. So let me pause here for a second and ask the moderator or the mayor to check with everyone to see whether Shane and Stacy need to provide further insight into the criteria.
Okay. Stacy, did you have anything further you wanted to share or add at this point?
This is Stacy Miller, Director of Economic Development. I did not at this time, but I'd be glad to answer any questions about how we derived at the criteria.
Okay. Mr. Hale, did you have anything further?
Just like Stacy Miller, again, Shane Hale, Town Manager, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. And do we have any questions from any town board at this point about the criteria?
Miles Baker does. Hold
Okay.
on one second. Go ahead, Miles.
Thank you, Miles Baker, Windsor Town Board. I don't think I have a question, and I guess my comment stems from our meeting Monday night. Just concern about where we draw the line with drive-through. I think they're going to be suffering equally as someone that just has a carry-out. So I don't know how much discretion is built into this. It sounds like Mr. McCarter mentioned some discretion for the town manager in the recital. So that's my comment, no real question.
Okay. And Mr. Hale has a response.
Yeah, thank you, Shane Hale, Town Manager. So, like Mr. McCarter said, currently Finance, Sales Tax Division, staff generally has the ability, if we have any business in town that has an issue with paying sales tax, we can already work with them. I think a good reason for this legislation is because it's so broad and is proactive. It really, I think, takes the blessing of the board. But if we have anybody, Mr. Baker, who just says, look, I'm struggling as well. I know I have a drive-through, but these issues come in. I do think staff has that ability to work with them already. I don't know that with this I'd have the ability to waive late fees for them. But other than that, I think we can work with anybody who's struggling to pay sales tax.
Even if they don't fall under this particular exact criteria at this moment.
That's right. That's exactly correct. So again, we do that on any given month. There's a handful of businesses that just don't remit on time or have an issue, and finance generally works with them, gets on a payment plan and works with them. So I think anybody else who has trouble collecting, or I'm sorry, trouble remitting to the town, who doesn't meet this criteria, we can still work with them. I think the only difference is that if they really don't fit the criteria, we wouldn't waive late fees or penalties necessarily. But if they were, maybe a first-time person coming in, maybe we could. And I would ask Dean Moyer, because I don't know if practically speaking, if staff has waived those in the past for these kinds of circumstances.
Tom Jones has a question.
Okay.
If you could unmute yourself.
Got it. I'm just curious. I'd say, okay, never mind. I think I just answered it for myself. Sorry.
No problem. Anybody else, Jess?
And is Dean on the call? He is, right?
Yeah. Did you want Dean to maybe respond to your?
Yeah, yes, Mayor. I think that, because I don't really know practice if they do sometimes use their discretion to waive late fees, and I hate to say that if
Okay. Mr. Moyer, can we have you jump on with us and join us? And welcome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Dean Moyer of Your Majesty's Secret Service. I am a special agent. No, but what I would add is just to echo what Shane said. It's obviously not always this kind of situation, but we do work with people that need help paying the sales tax. And, depending on the situation, we'll waive the penalties and interest, or at least reduce them. Most people that we work with, or even that are vendors for the town of Windsor sales, if they really mean no harm. For whatever reason, they get financially jammed up. They just didn't know they were supposed to be doing it.
Right.
Any number of reasons. We try to work with them and not be mean about it. So far, it's worked pretty well. I guess this is new territory here, and hopefully we can help our vendors get through this time here. Hopefully, it won't be as bad as people are thinking, but we're all in this together. So I'll be interested to see. We're coming up on the end of March here. I will be interested to see how much really that people were struggling this month.
Yeah.
I was because the February returns were due. What's the date today? The 26th. Last Friday, and the people. I said this in the staff meeting. People that we have had, that we don't have to chase, always send the money in. The people we do have to chase, we're going to have to chase them anyway. But, I guess I would reiterate that I don't think people mean harm by this, but if we can help them out, let's help them out. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
David Sosowski has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, assuming you all can hear me, David Slowski, District 6 Town Board. I asked two questions. Stacy, I had sent you a comment when you provided our list of potential recipients and questioned whether we should try to have an objective measure like, revenues, and what I had kind of just throwing thoughts out about revenues 75% or more derived from dine-in service. And then on the application of these people, have them, to their best ability, allocate their revenues based on dine-in versus takeout or drive-through. My thinking on, I don't know, my thinking on that is just that it's a objective measure. And I think in particular on your list, I commented about Pelican Joe's because we think of them as a takeout pizzeria. But if you go there at lunch hour, it's full of oil and gas workers and other people sitting in the restaurant having lunch. And it gets kind of packed again around the dinner hour. So I don't know. I don't have a good feel for what percentage of Pelican Joe's revenues are dine-in. They may not either, but I'm concerned that if we say you don't have drive-through service, that if you have it, you're not included. And we may be missing some businesses that we'd like to include. The second comment really was a conversation I think we had, I don't even remember where and when, and it was a question of whether we need to make sure that they are also current in payments and not on a payment plan as far as one of the eligibility criteria. Those were my two questions on this section 1.
Okay. Well, I would think that not necessarily are we going to deprive anybody who doesn't have a drive-through service or each without drive-through service.
Right, so if drive-through is really the big demarcation we have here, we also talk about dine-in restaurants, and so I think to Mr. Soslowski's point, when you talk about any specific business, if they have dine-in and takeout, where do they fall? Again, I would kind of defer back to Mr. Moyer's earlier answer, which is I think if we go through and it's a little bit unclear if somebody's in or out, if they say, geez, I'm struggling here, I'm hit like anybody else, I think staff has that discretion to allow them in. And then for the other question or comment that he had, I was actually speaking to Mr. Bennett the other day, and he pointed out that if somebody's behind, if they're not current, then we don't have anything to remit back to them. So for example, if somebody was just behind on a payment plan and they're only paid through December, we couldn't remit back to them February if we never collected it.
Right.
So I think it's a little bit self-correcting in that way. So I don't think we have to overthink if somebody's current or not. We can't remit what they haven't paid us.
Right. Well, and Pelican Joe's, I don't think has a drive-through, so they would be able to, they'd be eligible in my mind.
Right, well, I think...
I mean, they have takeout and delivery, but they don't have a drive-through.
Right, I think, well, what would put them in for me, I think initially we were thinking just the takeout, but just hearing that they have dine-in as well, I don't have any issue at all putting them on the list.
Yeah.
You know, I've...
Well, and I think that, as been pointed out by our finance director and, you know, by our town manager, there's some discretion to this, and I think right now, we're gonna err on the side of just to help save our business, right? So I think that that's where we're gonna be standing right now. We've been a pro-business community, has been our standpoint, and I think that that's what we, you know, when it's all said and done, when you look at the application, if you've got a business who really feels that they have eligibility here, I can't imagine that you would determine otherwise.
I'm seeing no other comments.
No other questions or comments? Okay. Mr. McCarger, we have no further questions or comments. Did you have anything else that you wanted to go through, though, in terms of the ordinance before I take public comment?
I do, Madam Mayor, if you will indulge me. I want to get into Section 2 and the notification. The Section 2A basically has the town manager making a call as to who might meet the eligibility criteria. So he and Ms. Miller have talked that over, and I think they've got a pretty good idea of who will be recipients of the notice. Mr. Soslowski has asked if we should throw the net more broadly, and that is, of course, a call that you all need to make. But assuming the applications are received by April 19, then under Section 2. Oh, hold on, I want to look at excuse me, Section 2D, the town manager has 7 days from that point to make the call. That is a final determination by the town manager. Someone had suggested an appeal process, and that someone still would probably like to talk about that. So I want to give Mr. Sislowski an opportunity to make his case for an appeal. We have turned that down because we just don't want to add to the administrative burden of running people through an appeals process. And by the time that's done, we will be, well into the period of deferral. And so it's a quick trigger that we've set up in this ordinance. I also want to point out in section 2B, the final determination is made by the town manager, but the last sentence gives him some room to consider particular circumstances in relation to the criteria, the need for uniformity and consistency, and purposes to be achieved by the ordinance. So in addition to all of the other things that were spoken to earlier about section 1 and the criteria, there is a little bit of room for the town manager to be, I'll say, objective or subjective when it comes to some of these applications, because it's not necessarily the same or uniform across different business models. So, Madam Mayor and Ms. Humphries, if you want to open this up to Mr. Sislowski and others to make comment on the notification subparagraph, that's 2A, and anything else under section 2 before we go on, that is fine with me.
Okay. Any questions or comments under section 2?
Mr. Sislowski has a comment.
Oh, thank you. David Sislowski, District 6 Town Board. And my thought was really the language in 2A in particular says that the town manager, in a sense, kind of decides who's going to even get an application based on his kind of conjecture on whether or not they meet the criteria in section 1. And I think from looking at Stacy's list, it really wasn't that long of a list. And if we instead just sent an application to everyone and said, hey, if you want to submit it, go ahead, you've got to meet these criteria, it removes sort of a subjective conclusion on the part of the town manager, and it doesn't look like it would add that much more to the administrative burden. I could be wrong, and I defer to Stacy and Shane on that. But if we simply sent it to everybody, then there's no argument later that someone says, well, geez, I think I would have qualified, but I didn't even get an application.
Okay. Mr. Hale?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So kind of our thinking here, Board, is that as we go through the list and we've identified who we think meet the criteria, that letter's going to say, we think you meet the criteria. We're going to let the businesses know this isn't a roll of the dice. This is, we think you meet it. I think if we send it to clearly businesses that are drive-through, that are not dine-in, that we don't think meet the criteria at all we're really doing, in my opinion, is inviting them to apply for a program that I'm going to deny. So that was kind of the thought, is let's go through, I'm working closely with finance and with Stacy to make sure we have a good list as far as the places we think qualify. I just hate to put businesses that clearly don't qualify on the list, send them that, and then say, oh, no, sorry, you're denied. And also send the letter, make it a little bit more lukewarm, and have businesses that are clearly qualified maybe not apply because they think, well, geez, this looks like it applies to, it may apply to me or maybe not.
Miles has a question.
Okay. Miles?
Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you, Miles Baker, Windsor Town Board. I couldn't hear Shane super well, so I will ask David Sislowski if you are suggesting we broaden the scope. My concern about mailing out to everyone and then denying them, I feel like we're setting up an expectation and only disappointing them if we leave the criteria and mail to everyone. So I'm not sure if you're suggesting we open it up to everyone or just mail to everyone and deny them later.
And Miles, that was exactly Mr. Hale's point, exactly what you just said. So even if you didn't hear him correctly, that's kind of was his point as well. Mr. Sislowski, did you have further comment or question?
No, I mean, I get that. You create a false expectation if you send it to people who don't qualify. And I guess if the application has the qualification criteria in it, in language that says if you believe you meet that criteria, submit the application. But in this case, we have sort of loose eligibility criteria, and then the town manager making a decision who he thinks might or might not fit that. I'm okay. I didn't feel like the list was that long or that many more people. But certainly I wouldn't want to create the false expectation either. That may have more to do with the wording on the application.
Okay.
But
Do we have anybody further who has a question or comment? Yes.
Tom Jones?
Doc Jones?
Well, word is going to get out among the places that aren't, highlighted as being eligible. And I think probably some of those are going to approach the town and say, well, why does he get it and I don't? And I think Dave tried to put a percentage on there, carry out versus in dining. And I guess I'd like to know how Shane will handle that, what kind of parameters he will apply to the businesses who think they deserve it, and we say no.
Okay, Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. So I think as the mayor said earlier, clearly this is an attempt by the town board to support our local businesses and make sure that as many of them weather the storm as possible. So I think, short of having a very established drive-through, I would think the criteria would be most places if they said, hey, I'm hurt by COVID-19, I think I qualify for this, we're very likely to err in their favor. I'm trying to think of a reason not to do that, but I think just understanding the board of where you're trying to steer this money, the intent and purpose of this, I think I would err in their favor more often than not. But as far as, getting into, I'm not going to go and say, well, what's your percentage of dine-in versus takeout? To me, that's maybe splitting the hair a little bit too much. I think between, Stacy Miller, Dean and I think in discussing these, even though it says the town manager, it's certainly not going to be just me in an office making this decision. So if there's any question about eligibility, I'll get the other staff in the room. And, I had been to Pelican Joe's before. I didn't really understand they had the dining capabilities. So just hearing that, I think if there's a question with the business, we can certainly even go by, walk in, take a look, and make that determination as well.
Do we have any others?
Hey.
Did you have a follow-up, Doc Jones?
No, I didn't.
Okay. I mean, I think too that when you mentioned the word's going to get out, I think the word is maybe going to get out. And I wouldn't be surprised if other folks who don't even fit into this criteria approach town manager, or I get an email that says, and we'll have to send that on to the finance office and the town manager's office, and they can hear them out. And if they have a legitimate concern, and I think that they would, again, err in their favor of applying this to their business as well.
That's right, Mayor. And I would just add, I think that, we're going to do continued outreach, other affected businesses. And like we talked about, this tool may help out with restaurants, but this tool isn't going to help out a hair salon. It's just not the same business. They don't have that retail sales tax generation. So I think we may have other businesses saying, okay, that doesn't work for me, but what can the town do for me?
Right.
So I think that's going to help us structure future work sessions with the board to again hear, okay, now there's these businesses and they've made these suggestions. Is there anything we can do?
Right. And for those folks that might be listening, I just might want to add to that conversation based on the conversation that we've had with some of our business folks already and some other emails that we've had and other discussions, that certainly the town and everybody is aware of all of our business community and all of their concerns outside of just our restaurant community. So certainly we are going to be looking at different avenues and ways and things we can do to help, although we're kind of limited in scope of, like you said, if they're not a tax-based generating business right now. But once we get word that everybody can be back in business. I think for some of those kinds of business is when we can especially come, bring on a lot more proactive marketing and some unified efforts to make folks know who's back, what doors are open, when they're open, and try to really, solidify our folks around that at that time. If there's no further questions or comments on Section 2, then I believe, Mr. McCarter, you can move on to Section 3.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ian McCarter, Town Attorney. Section 3 lays out the temporary deferral of sales tax. Each one who is deemed eligible will then be able to defer taxes that are due from February of 2020 through June of 2020. And because the payment dates lag a month behind, I have added parenthetically when those payments are due. So it's clear what we're talking about in terms of when the tax liability arises versus when the tax liability is due, when the remittance is due. So that's how we're making that clear. Subsection C then says, beginning July 1, payable by August 20, then deferrals cease and payments under the Windsor Municipal Code resume. So we're back to normal at that point. But during the period of deferral, the town will not initiate any enforcement and will not impose any late fees or penalties or anything like that. So that's how we're going to handle the period of deferral. And then I don't think there are any questions on that. Let's go on to Section 4 and capture the idea of a refund for the February payment. So if someone has paid their February taxes that were due before March 20th, then we will also allow them to check a box on the application to apply for a temporary refund of that, and then that gets repaid as provided in Section 5. So we have Section 3 and Section 4 dealing with deferrals and refunds, and now Section 5 has to do with settling up. Madam Mayor, are there any questions about Section 3 or Section 4 before we go on to Section 5?
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I'm seeing none.
We aren't seeing any, Mr. McCarter.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Ian McCarter, Town Attorney. Section 5 basically says that the bell tolls at noon on December 31st, and what that means is that by that date and by that time, all of the taxes that were deferred under this ordinance and all of the refunds that were temporarily made must be brought current. And the idea is not necessarily to require that all in a lump sum on that day, but what it says is by that day, it's got to be settled up. And so I'm looking at a comment from Mr. Sislowski where he asks, is this going to be in installments or by a lump sum? And my comment is, it could be either, as long as the last installment is paid by noon on December 31st of this year. So that should cover whether installments are due. In other words, if they wanted to get started making installment payments starting in July or even before that, they can do that to get themselves ahead when the final tally is due. And speaking of that, Mr. Sislowski also asked if we would be sending invoices to tell people what they owe. That is not our usual practice when we have payment plans, and certainly they will know what they owe based upon the returns that must be filed each month during the deferral period. So I don't think it's necessary for us to invoice people. Of course, subsection B says if it hasn't been paid in full by the deadline, then the town is in a position to impose penalties and interest, and that's just something that happens whenever someone is late on their taxes. The other part of this under subsection C is it creates a lien. Unpaid taxes creates a lien on the assets of the business. This is already provided for under the sales tax code. that the town of Windsor has a lien on equipment and furnitures and fixtures in the establishment. That's not really new, although what is new is that lien will be what we call a super priority lien. Lastly, under subsection D, if we have to sue somebody or issue a distraint, which is an administrative process to enforce the taxes, then attorney fees and costs of enforcement would be added. That is also provided in the existing code, so I don't see that as anything new. And, those are situations where we have no other choice. So let me just get to section 6, because that should be pretty obvious. What we're saying in section 6 is all of the rest of chapter 4, the sales tax, the finance portions of the Windsor Municipal Code are not affected by this ordinance other than what we've said above. So if there are questions about the payment deadline and how we might enforce things in the event of non-payment, I'm happy to answer those. Dean is also available to answer those questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments or any final questions or comments from any town board members at this point?
Tom Jones has a question.
Doc Jones?
Yeah, Dean, payments for February were due March 20th, is that correct?
It is correct, sir.
Have they been, most of these places been reported in a timely manner?
Within a couple of days, yes. Like I mentioned earlier, the people that pay all the time. The people we have to chase, we're going to have to chase. That it doesn't get too different month to month. But yes, the short answer is yes.
Do you anticipate any bookkeeping hassles if a large number of these people came in and wanted a refund for February?
Well, to be honest here, I'm not particularly crazy about refunding February money that we already have. Going forward is another thing. That'd be easy enough. And I mean, again, short answer, it's going to be, however we do this, it's going to be more administrative work. And then, with people working from home and the remote stuff and people not coming to the office, that makes it more complicated. I mean, I'm not certain you can get around that, but short answer, yes, I think it would.
I just wonder if these businesses have budgeted for this, they paid it, if maybe we just let the refund part go. I know I'm kind of backing up here, but I suppose if they, wanted to come in and appeal because they're in dire straits, we could make exceptions, but it sounds like, it's gonna be a lot more bookkeeping.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that there's no denying that.
It is why in the initial conversation I tried to detract us from moving in that direction. But however, any other thoughts or questions or comments from the board?
Miles Baker.
Mr. Baker?
Go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Yep, sorry, Miles Baker, Windsor Town Board. In regards to the rebate, is that something they have to come in and request versus we are just mailing them out?
They have to request.
I can answer that.
Or Ms. McCarger, go ahead.
That's correct. That's correct. This is Ian McCarger. The ordinance is set up and the application form is set up in the form of a request. It isn't automatic.
Okay, thank you. And then with my eye towards the next town board, there is a, obviously they can revoke this if they chose to. Right?
I think that's a question, Mr. McCarger.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that the question was finished. Yes, the town board can, this does not bind future town boards.
Okay, and then my other thought is maybe the future town board receipts on their monthly financial report, how much has been deferred, so they have an eye towards that at the end. That's it.
Okay?
I guess to speak to, this is Dean Moyer, Finance Director. I think to speak to that, Mr. Baker, yeah, we can put that in our monthly financial report if and how much we have deferred to people or sent, what money we have sent back to people.
Okay, because I'm thinking I'm assuming the sales tax is going to be greatly diminished, so the amount we're talking may not be a huge number. While obviously it has an impact on the budget, I'm not sure that the deferral will be a huge number.
No, I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of interested to see how the March numbers come in, because before this meeting, I just got home from King Soopers, and they actually had some things you could buy today. So they even had toilet paper if y'all want any. But I'm interested to see if their numbers, and as I've said a number of times, Safeway and King Soopers are our biggest sales tax generators. And in addition to that, I've seen Amazon delivery vans all over town. My neighborhood is not that big, but I see Amazon people in here every day. So it will be interesting to see how March turns out here. And again, I say sometimes short answer, but I keep babbling here. But I'm not certain how much, how the size of the dollar amounts on this forgiveness / rebate thing would be, because that wasn't keeping us afloat, is what I'm saying. So that's it.
Nick, do we have any other questions or comments?
That makes sense.
Ken Bennett?
Hi, this is Ken Bennett, Windsor Town Board. Regarding the refund of February sales tax, I've thought a lot about that. And my guess is February for most of our businesses was a normal or even maybe a good month. But the problem we're trying to solve is buying a little bit of time for businesses that are suddenly struggling in March. So I favor the refund if they apply for it and ask for it, because it might just be enough that they can pay their March lease or rent. It might help them make payroll for a week or two before employees can apply for unemployment. So I'm just weighing in my support for that process.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else before we open it to public comment?
I'm seeing no one.
Okay. So we're going to get ready to open this up for public comment. Again, if you are participating via computer, please enter your question or comment in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. If you are on the phone, please listen for your name or phone number, as the moderator will call out who is allowed to speak at that time. She will unmute participants one at a time, at which time you will be given 3 minutes to speak. At this time, we're going to pause for a moment to allow people one more chance to get situated and get questions in or be ready on the line.
Madam Mayor, I show no questions in the Q&A section. We do have one attendee by the name of Brooke Hansen. Brooke, would you like to speak? If so, you can unmute yourself.
Honestly, I actually own a salon in town, so I was just kind of listening to see if you guys were going to talk about salons. It seems like, which totally understandable. With sales tax, you're more worried about the restaurant.
Yeah,
So
and-
honestly, that's kind of why I was on. And we had a great meeting at 2:00 with some ladies. That was awesome for salons. So
Oh, great. Well, thank you for engaging and being
Yeah.
part, and I would just say, stay tuned, because I think that we will be trying to think of ideas and ways that we can continue to help and support all of our businesses in Windsor, and among those will be salons, of course.
yes, and the two ladies we spoke with earlier were from the town of Windsor, and they were great with helping us with wonderful ideas on how to get some help and support.
Good to hear.
So definitely appreciated that. Yeah, definitely happy to live in Windsor and be from such a great town.
Good to hear.
Well, let's let her
Yeah.
keep on talking, Mayor. She's
Oh,
great.
There you go. That's awesome.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment?
There are none.
Okay. Any final comments or questions from the town board? I know there were some references to perhaps making any changes, but I didn't hear any town board members picking up and wanting to change the ordinance as it currently stands now. So this would be the opportunity for any final comments or questions, or asking for that final change. If not, I would seek a motion to approve this ordinance as presented.
Madam Mayor, this is Paul Rennemeyer, Windsor Town Board. I move that we approve ordinance number 2020-1606.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer. Is there a second?
Hi, this is Barry Wilson, Town Board District 2. I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second for Mr. Wilson to approve ordinance number 2020-1606 as presented. Any further questions or comments? And I'm pausing because we do have a little bit of a delay that we need to account for. I want to make sure.
I'm seeing none, ma'am.
If not, then we are going to do a roll call vote, and I believe Ms. Eicher is on the phone to do that for us. Ms. Eicher.
You can unmute yourself, Crystal.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you,
Yes.
Okay. Miles Baker,
Miles Baker, yes.
Barry Wilson,
Yes.
Ken Bennett,
Yes.
Paul Rennemeyer,
Yes.
Tom Jones,
Yes.
David Sosowski,
Yes.
Christy Melendez.
Yes. And it passes unanimously on a 7-0 vote.
Okay, so-
And with that, if you all will stay tuned, I know Mr. Hale would like to talk to us about our future meetings.
Yeah, thank
Mr.
you,
Hale.
Mayor. So I appreciate the board's willingness to make this meeting occur at 4 p.m. The question to you all is if this time would work moving forward, at least until we're back to normal. We could just kind of have our normal meeting cadence at 4 p.m. Again, assuming everybody's at home anyway, working from their computers, that may be more convenient for you. So it's just a question to the board.
Open it up.
Okay, is 4 o'clock for our future, welcome to our new future virtual world of meetings, by the way, for those folks that are out there. Is 4 o'clock as we move forward, is that agreeable to the rest of the town board members?
This is Barry Wilson, District 2. I agree to that.
Okay,
Ken Bennett. This is Ken Bennett, yes.
Tom Jones, yes.
Soslavsky, yes.
Baker and
Paul
Rennemeyer?
I'm okay with it.
Okay. Miles?
Yeah.
Okay, then our future meetings will be meeting like this at 4 o'clock.
Great.
And with that, I would seek a motion to adjourn.
Madam Mayor, this is Paul Rennemeyer on the Windsor Town Board. I would move to adjourn this meeting.
Before we have a
Ken
second.
Bennett, Windsor Town Board, second.
Oh,
Sorry, I apologize.
Okay.
This is Jess Humphreys. Tom Jones raised his hand for a question. Tom, do you have something more to add?
Ian, this is Tom Jones, District 5. Ian, you mentioned we have to sign some kind of affidavit doing this remotely. Is that still the case?
That's correct, Dr. Jones. Crystal will circulate by email tomorrow, probably, it may even be by the end of the day today, but sometime quickly in the morning, Crystal will circulate an affirmation for each of you to check the box and sign and get back to her. And once she receives them back, then we will consider the vote final.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McCarter?
Yes,
Sorry,
sir.
Sislowski here, and I imagine it'll be on Crystal's email, but just to confirm, if we do that, scan it and return it, is that sufficient? Do you need original?
Scanned a PDF is acceptable.
Thank you.
okay, and with that, we do have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett to adjourn this special meeting. All in favor, or I guess we need to do we need to do a roll call vote?
That's up to you.
I guess we do a roll call vote. Ms. Eicher, please do a roll call vote to adjourn.
Miles Baker,
Yes.
Barry Wilson,
Yes.
Ken Bennett,
Yes.
Paul Rennemeyer,
Yes?
Tom Jones,
Yes.
David Sosowski,
Yes?
Mayor Melendez.
Yes, and we are officially adjourned. Thank you, everyone.